Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Motion Design Hotline. I am one of your hosts, Evan Abrams, and joined, as always, by the other of the hosts, Kyle Hamrick. How you doing, man?
I am doing fabulously. Feel like this is going to be a great way to start off your day, right?
Well,
or ours.
Yeah, I mean, it's 9 o'clock out there on the Pacific Coast, so good morning, Pacific Coast, and good evening, Netherlands, I guess. So we got people all over the world. Wherever you're watching from, let us know. We want to know. So, Pedro, let us know where you are.
We need to know.
Yeah, we crave it. We must have this information. As we're kicking off the day today, we got kind of a big announcement going on. So this all day today on Adobe Live. Things are gonna be a little bit different around here.
Just a little bit. They're doing an all-day boot camp with Goodtype and Women of Type. I believe that is called a type takeover.
We're being taken over.
We need some sirens here to make it a thing. Yeah. So stay tuned here to the Adobe Live socials for some great opportunities to see new art and get inspired. And of course, stick around here on Adobe Live all day if that is your type of programming.
It's like that. That's what this show is.
Yep. Welcome for anyone new. And of course, later today on Adobe Live, you can catch an interview with Jess from Women of Type and Katie and Ilana from Goodtype.
Yeah.
And now that I have said Ilana's name, I feel like I see this little flashing icon I've never seen before.
That's Evan, the actual physical hotline that we don't usually activate.
We call ourselves a hotline, but we don't have like a red phone just sitting here. But apparently the powers of Goodtype and Goodtype have allowed a direct pipeline here.
Let me see if I can tune in the dial tone for you here. It's typography, take over.
That's the ringtone, folks. Evan, can you answer that already so that this ringtone stops?
Typography. All right, so let me just see what's on the line.
Type can be beautiful, but it really comes to life when you can get it in motion. Can Motion Design Hotline give us some techniques for really making our type jump off the screen?
Let's go back to us. Let's go back to us. So there we go. Hopefully everybody heard that. According to my switcher, they did. So we will find out.
Good.
But for you and I, Kyle, looks like we are indeed going to make some type pop off the screen. Pretty normal.
That sounds like a challenge to which we must step up.
A challenge?
No.
Yeah. Oh, is that a challenge? So that's what we're doing. We've been challenged to do this. To roll back the kayfabe on this a little bit. We kind of already did it, so we can kind of.
How dare you?
I'm shattering people's illusions pretty early in the morning. But yeah, we've got some examples of indeed type popping and bursting and exploding. So that's what we're going to be doing this morning. And if this is the sort of thing that you like to do or you'd love to do, give it a try. We got like more people than usual watching today. So I'll say, if you are new to After Effects, that's what we do on the Motion Design Hotline. We use After Effects to solve problems. And so if you've never used After Effects before, we're going to try to be kind of gentle in our introduction to this stuff and get you some techniques that you can hopefully adapt to your own typographically focused artworks. But Kyle, why don't we jump over
when we get into the things that are less beginner friendly, just consider it aspirational and a thing that you can look at as something you can work towards. But we'll try to give you an easy entry point here. But we'll do some wacky stuff too.
Exactly. So speaking of wacky, let's go over to Kyle. Kyle, we're going to go to your screen and see what you got cooking. And I'll just say while we go over there, just hello to everyone over there on the YouTubes. So hey there, Brooke. Hello. Hey Theo, what's going on? And everyone over on Behance. Sean, hello. RB, what's going on?
A lot of regulars MCing, a lot of new folks.
Yeah, Vitor, hello. And so if you're new to After Effects, let us know that in the comments as well, because we want to know in the chat, what your familiarity level is with a lot of the stuff that we're going to be kind of talking you through, so that we know to hey, okay, slow it down, Evan and Kyle. We nerd out pretty hardcore sometimes, so we'll just try to rein ourselves in. But yeah, Kyle, what do you got going on?
Well, what I have going on here is one text layer. one editable text layer. Looky there. I will prove that it is editable. Okay. So, right. Okay. Of course, here in After Effects, we can animate stuff, and there's different ways to do that. After Effects has what are called text animators, and they let you do all kinds of wacky stuff. But before I even get there, I want to quickly point out that we do have all of these animation presets over here. Boop. There's a whole bunch. There's a whole thing for text. I have some extra ones installed and a lot that I've built, but you get a ton of these built right into After Effects. And even if you've been using After Effects for a while, there are a lot of newer ones. I believe some smart people like even Abrams made some of these even. So even if you don't know what you're doing at all with the type animators, of course you will at the end of this show, at least a little bit. There are plenty of things in here that you can aim for and use. I'm going to search for one because I don't want to have to twirl through everything. I'm going to look for one that's called Slide In from Comp Edge. I really like this one because I think it's a good showcase of what some of these newer presets are capable of. I'll just grab this and drop it on my type layer right here. And oh no, it disappeared. That's because you can see it's actually up there at the top of my screen. And that is because the animation preset was applied, created some keyframes in there, which I can reveal like this. And if I do a quick preview, whoa, wow, look at that. I didn't have to make anything, it's already animated. And crucially, you get a bunch of controls up here. So if I actually want it to come from, say, the bottom instead, I just need to change it right there. And now it comes from the bottom instead. So there's a bunch of stuff in here, and you can get a lot of, kind of your everyday movements just by applying some presets. And you know what? While this is a little bit different, I want to show this one too, because these are some of my favorites of the new ones. There's a whole category in here under countdowns, number counters, excuse me, like a countdown here. A lot of these things are a little more difficult to make than you might think, especially keeping the spacing even and stuff like that. So if you need to do a countdown or a currency or a percentage or a timer, there's new things over here that'll make those much easier. And you get all these handy controls over here so that you can just change that value easily without having to set it up yourself with anything weird. But let's take a step back. I'm sure a lot of folks knew about presets already.
Sure.
So let's see what we can do manually. Wow. Okay. And yes, I am seeing some references to my text animator video that I released for School of Motion a couple of years ago. I highly recommend watching that. It'll really help you understand how these work and give you some cool creative ideas for them. So you can do this just by twirling the layer open, and there's a little animate flyout, or in your properties panel, there's a thing right here to add an animator. So let's just add a position. I'm going to do kind of the very short version of this today because we have a lot of cooler stuff to get to. But I've applied this animator, and there's a position property right here that's different from the layer's position property. And now I can change the position of these letters. Right now it's changing all of them because I haven't dialed in what I want to affect. But you have this thing called a range selector that lets you choose what parts of your type layer are affected by that thing, okay? And so right now, if I'm affecting, say, 20% of this layer, I could use this offset property to push that 20% through the layer, okay?
Yeah, and if people want to get your faces really close to the screen, look at those little red lines on there, and that is saying, I sometimes say, like, we're telling who is getting told to do what, and then how much, right? You
can actually use these to control the thing as well.
You just slide it around. You see the numbers changing. So for new people, of which I saw many in the chat, the range selector, who's moving, and by how much.
So let's set up a. Ilana asked if we could make this pop off the screen, jump off the screen.
Yeah, that's what I think the brief says.
Yeah, let me just do a quick little thing here and see where I can get. So I'm going to set this to index, so that's like the character count instead. And we got position, and maybe I'll add a scale property as well, because getting closer to us means bigger. And you can see these are scaling from the bottom of the characters, so I'll just quickly go into more options and change this grouping alignment. That's kind of like your per character anchor point. And so now you see these are all moved up a little bit and all scaled a bit. Let's maybe make it so that this is only affecting one character at a time. There we go. And then I could just animate my offset property from, say, -1, which pushes it just off that left edge. And then I'll animate that over to, we have 7 characters, I believe, so I'll go to 8. And so I could, there we go. It's kind of jumping. You know, it's not great. It's okay. I think one of the best ways to make things really pop out is to also make them look thicker, bigger, right? This is a pretty thin typeface right now. So I could select my type and I could set this to black, but now they're all thick. And so like, that's not quite getting the effect I want. There is a way that you could actually change the weight of your characters. And we'll get into some more advanced versions of this later. But, you know, if I wanted to get really granular, I could select one character and I could set that character to black. And you can actually animate your source text property right here. So then I could move up 1 frame and I could set this back to thin. And oh boy, see, this is already like more tedious than I care for it to be. Right. But so you could do this per character, or you could do this with the entire word. And you could keyframe each of these, like frame by frame, change the weight of either the whole line or each character. The bummer there is that once you've set that up, you are actually changing the source text itself. And so if I realize I wanted to actually change this to a different thing, like that's a new keyframe. And that other thing I made, like it's still going to be that word. So once these are in, they're in. However, you can do some other stuff. Let me quickly show you something just a little bit different here. Set this back to the, I'll just undo a few times. I want to set this back to thin real quick and point something out. There we go. I didn't want to undo too many times. So I'll make 1 keyframe here at super thin and 1 keyframe here at black. And you can just imagine that I made some in-between ones. I'll make one in here for medium. So I could roll through this and you can see like I can kind of get there. You know, if I have enough weights on the typeface, I can work something out that's, you know, okay if I do it fast. But one thing you'll notice is that this is also like making a pretty big difference in the width of this, okay? And so what I would probably do is look here at the fattest version of it, and I would bring up my rulers with Control R, and let's make myself some quick guides so that I know where that is, because if I look over here at the thinnest version, looky that, much thinner. And that's not going to feel like a really smooth transition. So in addition to this other animation stuff I can do, I can also animate the tracking. You can animate pretty much any of the properties that you have over in the type panel. So I could just animate the tracking from 0. I'll just stick that over here with the fattest one. And then let's just kind of scrunch this out until it hits that same width. And so it's not going to be smooth now because this tracking is changing between these two values smoothly, and the typeface is, you know, all chunky and staccato right now. But you can kind of see, you know, what I'm aiming for there if I sort of jump between those two, so that, you know, I could keep the width the same. Now here's the pre-baked cooking show version of this, where I'm animating between all the weights of this typeface, and I have made the tracking fit, and you know that's working okay. It looks pretty good at 12 frames per second, and maybe I could add back in this other animator that I set up that does a little bit of a like character hop as well. And so that's, you know, that's arguably jumping out at us.
Arguably,
still, yeah, still has some stuff to do.
Yeah.
Now, Evan, I have some to take this further. The rest of my solutions are kind of nerdy.
Okay.
I will point out there are some good third-party tools that can allow you more direct access to variable typefaces. But the big thing is that they bake the type layer down to what are called shape layers, like native vector layers. And so you can do all kinds of neat stuff, but you are losing any editability on that text.
True.
Asterisk, because I'm going to come back with a different solution for that. But that seems like maybe a good time to pitch it over to you.
Yeah. Well, before we go, Ray Lancashire is asking, is there a script to make the text bolder than lighter? Kyle, I would love for you to just preview where you're going. Just roll what your final is going to look like so we can assuage some fears.
Yes. I should have just had this ready to go. So this is the example that I'm working towards here. And this is all still editable text. And you can see here, I'm going from something very light to very black is probably the weight of it. So yes is the answer. I also saw a question, where can I get the project files? So a little bit, usually about 10 or 15 minutes after the show, because we usually incorporate stuff that we're working on during the show. If you go over to motiondesignhotline.com, you will find a huge show archive and project files.
Yep, a real website for real people like you.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so that's where Kyle's driving at. Let's jump over to my screen. I'll show you where I'm going with this. I am being maybe a bit more literal with popping off the screen, with taking things into the third dimension. So I'm going with push, 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 push. So we got the stuff pushing out right at us using the power of the third dimension.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's the dimension we live in. And although some would say that we actually live in the fourth dimension because we live linearly through time, but that's not good for us to think about this early in the day. So how do we get there, right? How do we end up at that? Well, I'll just strip it back to just having the one layer where we begin our journey, which looks something like this. Push, 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 push. So because text layers in here are vector things, we're able to extrude them using some pretty excellent technologies. So I'm just going to make a new composition. When you're making stuff, you got to make a composition. Everything lives inside composition. We call them comps. This is 1080 pixels by 1080 pixels. You can dial in your frame rate, usually something like 24 or 30. Like I say, if we're new to After Effects just in general, these are the kind of the base settings. If you know, for example, I'm making something for social media, please just enjoy the social media templates. Have a good time. Don't overthink it. And then make sure the duration is something long enough to accommodate whatever it is that we are doing. We can always make it shorter. It doesn't matter, right? Everything can be changed. Nothing is permanent in here. Nothing is permanent anywhere. So here, Kyle, I'm getting too existential.
We're getting really,
So I'm just going to type out push, push out here, and we use our text tool. You can grab it up here, Command T, and then you can set all the things you want to be true about that text layer here in your properties panel. I'm using Super Clarendon. Super Clarendon is
not regular Clarendon. That was not good enough for today.
No. And black is the weight. It's a type day, so I'm going to start calling out typography stuff.
Yep.
So I'll just scale that up a little so it's a little bit bigger in our screen, and let's animate it. So Kyle showed adding text animators of one type where everything is happening all the time. I'm going to say I want to animate. What do I want to animate? Well, I'm not sure yet. I think the first thing I want to do is make this thing extrude. So let's make the layer three-dimensional. Boop. You do that, and we get this cool widget, and then you can twist it along some axes if you wish. You could also come down here to active camera and say, take me to custom view 1. Now we're looking at it orthographically, isometrically. One of these words. My drafting teacher is going to maybe watch this. Sorry. So now we know it's three-dimensional. Just look at it. And I want it to extrude. So we come down to geometry options. If you don't see those, twirl down some more into geometry options, and make sure that
If you still don't see them, you're on the wrong 3D engine.
Make sure this says advanced 3D, the most advanced of 3D that we have going currently. And then I'm just going to give it a little extrusion depth, and then it gets pushed away from us, pushed away, and like that. Now, my goal is to push it forward, so we'll get to that eventually. But step 1, just get it extruded. So far, I'm nailing it. I'm absolutely crushing it with this. And I want to animate the 3D-ness of each one individually, so please enable per character 3D. Notice that this little cube turned into 2 cubes. That tells you something, and things are going well for us. So now we can alter each of them individually as we desire. The thing I wish to animate is their scale. So I'm going to just come down to scale. And as you see, we've got the range selector, just like Kyle did. It's selecting everybody, and we can scale everything. And I'm going to unlink the scales, and I'm just going to scale the Z scale. So we're having a nice little Z scale party. It's Kyle, it's pushing away again. It keeps pushing away from me. It's like I'm repugnant or something. I'm getting memories of high school coming back to me, everyone being pushed away. So what I really need to do is adjust my attitude. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to change where the anchor point is. So I'm going to develop hobbies, interests, and a personality and change my anchor point. So this animator, you can rename animators. So I selected it, hit enter, and I'm going to call this the pushing power exclamation point, because I'll remember what that means. Then I'm going to come up here to animate, and I'm actually going to animate the anchor points. And so I'm just going to make sure that this one happens first. And I'm going to move the anchor point. Again, we're talking about the Z, so I'm going to move this by 50 pixels, 50 units. I extruded it back 50. So now if I move the anchor point back 50, the anchor point must now live on the back face of whatever this is. So if I start scaling, now I'm pushing forward. Things are coming towards me. I've changed my attitude, and the universe is manifesting much better for me. So by changing where you scale from, it's going to go in the direction that you want. So, okay, I've got it scaling at me. Okay, cool. Let's get out of custom view 1 and go to this. All right, oh, that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll go like that so it's push over top of each other. How's that? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's really coming at us. So that's pretty good. I think maybe about 500% is pushed enough, because the way we look at it is about to change. Right now we are looking through a camera. I'm seeing you through a camera. You're seeing Kyle through a camera. The government is also looking at you through a camera. No, never mind. So I'm going to create a new camera, a different camera that I will choose. I will make choices. And I don't really care about the 1-node, 2-node-ness of it. It might get a little bit confusing. We're not going to move this camera. We're just going to leave it where it is. But I'm going to pick a preset. Now, if you're not familiar with photography, maybe these numbers sound crazy. But if you go with 50 millimeter, it'll look pretty much the same. So that's the default.
Yeah. Pretty close to your eyes.
Yeah.
Kind of the standard. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you start to go more telephoto, you start to lengthen that, you're going to see a compression of objects. They'll appear flatter. And if you want things to get more extreme, you're going to go for a wider or shorter.
Why did I do that for a wide angle? I don't know. We had a whole episode where we yap about this stuff for close to an hour pretty recently. Much. So
yeah. It's good.
Motiondesignhotline.com. You'll see a lot of episodes of us talking about a lot of these things in depth.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the 15 millimeter, and when I hit OK, you can see now it's really coming at me. So by dialing and changing this, I'm going to go 15. What if we go 20? What if we go 24? We're changing kind of the ratio of how extreme that gets. And then you just maybe have to push this kind of away and towards. So you're really just kind of dialing in. So if you hit P, you'll call it the position of a thing. And then you can kind of, let's just rack it forward and backward a bit till we're happy when it feels inframed. So now if I tap the U key twice, and I'm just going to kind of bring this back to 100 and push it up to 500. Okay, that's nice and good. I hope everyone's with me so far. Let me know if this sounds crazy.
I'm with you, and that's really all that matters.
That's true. This is a show for 2 people.
Yeah. If you're hopelessly confused, let us know in the chat, and I'll yell at Evan.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up this proportional grid that will help me then position this, because unlike other designers, I am bad at ratios and making things look pleasant. So this is, other designers do that. I don't do that as well.
We make stuff move as an excuse for lack of design skill.
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of compensating for something. So there we go. We got this pushing at us. This feels good. Now, we talked about range selectors. Who is being told to move or to scale the most, right? So Kyle, you're always scaling the most. So Kyle is always the most. So
quick, I'll hop in real quick. I just saw a question. What's the difference between adjusting the position versus the camera?
So everything has position. Let's go back a bit. First off, everything has position. The camera has a position in space. These words have a position in space. I'm going to look at this through custom view 1, and you can actually see here's the camera. The camera lives here, and what it sees is this lovely rectangle. That's the plane at which it is seeing. And so this has a position that we can move forward and backwards. This has a position we can move all over the place. They're controlled by the same logic. Now, the difference between changing, say, where the camera is forward and backward and changing the physical qualities of the camera are changing how things will look looking through the same camera. So
just imagine it like, using a real camera in the real world and getting closer and further away from something. And while it's not the same, using a zoom, you can get kind of the same effect.
Exactly. So if you've ever seen the movie Jaws, in which the camera gets away from Richard Dreyfuss, and then they're changing that lensing, that zooming quality to it as the camera moves close and far, you notice the background compressing and freaking out back there. So that is the effect of changing both the position of the camera and its zoom. And so the lens wideness or zoom length is the thing that is changing. So that is,
I believe pros like to call that a zolly if you feel like searching for more examples.
Yeah. Zaddies like us do.
Zoom dolly.
So, yeah. So we have to say whom is being pushed and by how much. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add to this. Actually, not add. I got a range selector. Let's just modify this one for now. And I'm going to go with, don't be a square shape, be a ramp shape. So if I change it to a ramp down or a ramp up, for example, and then I offset this through, notice how it is changing who and by how much. So let's go to ramp down, and I'm just going to push this through. Boop, 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 boop. So we're going to go from here. I'm keyframing the offset, so at this point it's negative 100, and at this point it's 100. Push. Oh, hey man, it just pushed right at us. That's great.
Yep, love it.
Flawless. And the quality of it I don't particularly enjoy. So let's just crank up these easings. And the easing is again affecting who and by how much. And you notice that now it's a little eased on the top and tail. So let's go 80% on each of those and keep playing that through and see if we like it. Pop, 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 pop. Oh, that's feeling nice and good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to add another range selector. What? Add selector range. Evan, you're crazy. You're adding a second range selector. What's happening? I'm going to change this from square to ramp up. And this one is going to be pushed through as well. However, they won't be adding. They will be intersecting through each other. And so if I push this away, if I offset this at one end, and then I push it through, I'm doing opposite of what just happened. And so we can ramp it down, ramp it up, ramp it around, ramp, romp. So there we go, ramping and romping. Let's get the same easing going on. Let's have a little bit of symmetry in our life, and we'll go pop, 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 beep, 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 boop. Now the reason I do it this way, thusly, is such that I have these two ranges that I can now manipulate. Are they overlapping with each other? Like that? Are they hanging out for a bit? Fully up and then fully down? You've got way more flexibility to enjoy how you want these to go now that you've divided coming and going into these two separate ideas. So there we go. So that's, those were ramping up and ramping down. Now, yeah, so Theo's saying ramp up and ramp down. Those are confusing words. Yes, because we are ramping up to a value and then ramping down to a value. The key takeaway is that each of these letters can be expressed as having 0 or 100% of the change going into them. Are we ramping up to 100 or are we ramping down to 0 are the questions. All of that is theoretical and confusing. And if you're a first timer, download our project files and it will help. But I think that's looking pretty great, Kyle. I'd go 10 out of 10 on this one. So I'm crushing it. And the next thing that I want to do, though, is I want the sides of this to be different, right? Let's not worry about making them different colors. Let's just make the sides not white for now. And so I'm going to add, the anchor point change is changing everybody's everything. So I might as well just add something in here. And I'll say add the property of side, add the property of side color RGB, and then I pick a color. Oh, I've already picked red. That's so good. Let's pick a nice vibrant magenta. There we go. And the other thing I want to do is stylize this whole ding-dang thing to not be as rebooty as it looks right now. You know, all of this like shading, all of this diffuse, we would call it. All of my chartreuse diffuse, chartreuse is green, is making me puce. So here we go. Let's go ahead and change the lighting situation, which you can do by affecting a few things. And the one thing that you can affect under material options is how the different lighting situations will impact it. So I'm going to say specular intensity 0. No specular allowed. Specular is bright, bing, shines. Specular shininess, also none. Thank you. I don't care about those. The diffuse and the ambient are the two things that I'm that we're concerned about. So I'm going to go new light. And the type of light I want is an ambient light. Now, if you're not familiar with lighting, an ambient light is projecting light everywhere all the time, and the photons are going in every possible direction everywhere.
Not very realistic, but useful.
They do not exist in nature. Even when you go outside, the photons are indeed coming from the sun, and they are blasting at us. That is why some parts of the round Earth are put into shadow. This is how we know. And the length of the pole tells Aristophanes how the Earth goes.
This is secretly a show about how everything works.
Yes. Kinda. We talked about optics. Now we've talked about lights. So ambient light. We create the ambient light, and hey, would you look at that? Everybody is washed in a glow. It's so good. In fact, we can just take the diffuse right away and say, I don't care about any diffuse in this at all. We're only interested in how this responds to ambient light. So that's what we're keen on. So if ambient light is down but diffuse light is up, well, there's no diffused light in the scene at all. So it's really just the ambient light that we're interested in. So there we go. And we got no shadows. In fact, we can say, you know, accept shadows off, cast shadows off. That's going to save you some processing power. But hey, look at this. Now we got the edges, we got the walls doing exactly what we want. And if this is as far as you need to go with this, you have crushed it. So way to go. The only things that I would say that you really need to do to kind of make this your own is to kind of just adjust the angles of things. Push, 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 push. So maybe we could move that down here like this. Maybe I could grab our rotation. Like if you wanted something that was kind of pushing up, pushing down, something like that. And if this is it, if this is the loop that you're doing, then you're going to hit B to set the start and N to set the end of your kind of render area here. And this will be that. That's it. You did it. Your first animation, you got to feel good about that. I feel good that you did it. So what else can I say?
And honestly, if this is your first animation and you replicate this exactly, you're doing pretty okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely knocking it out of the park if you're following along and this is working out. So
it's a little more advanced stuff.
Exactly. So, Kyle, let's leave my screen because I've talked for too long, and the next phases of mine are going to get a little bit wackadoo.
Oh,
so let's cut back to you and get crazy with your stuff.
Okay. My stuff is going to get a little more, if you're not as technical of a person, might get a little intimidating for the next few minutes, but, stay with me here. I want to show you something. So After Effects has these things called expressions where you can use little bits of code to animate stuff for you if you want. But a way that I use them a lot is just to link properties to other things. It makes things a little easier to control. And so what I have done here is to that source text property, which is actually the text input, okay? You actually, in addition to just typing letters into this and having it keep track of all the styling stuff that you've done to it over in the type panel, you also have access to all kinds of wacky stuff. And I can show you the whole list here. It's a big list, it's several deep. You can choose things like which font it is using and is it all caps? You can set the tracking, you can set the fill color. And the reason that these exist as sort of these little code snippets is because then you could connect that to something else. And so with this little bit of code right here, I tried to make this kind of as human readable as I could. So let's just quickly talk through this. I created a variable called T, which
code
is just
for humans is what we.
Yep. just looking at itself. I literally just took this thing and said, look at yourself. That's all it is. And then I created a variable called font size, which links to this little slider control that I've added right here. Expression controls, I use them a lot. You can find them under Effect, Expression Controls. There's several. They're just here to control other stuff. It gives you a little interface so that you can connect things. And then these text styling expressions are a little unique. So they're a little more complex than a lot of other ones. If I were just linking, you know, the layer's position to this or something, that's pretty easy. These need a little thing. So I'm going to create a thing called style, and that says look at your own style, basically. And then to that, we're adding that set the font size, whatever that font size variable is. And that font size variable just takes us to that slider. And so all of that is just so that I can have a little slider control right here where I can easily control or keyframe the size of this actual font. And so I could easily animate this from 1 all the way up to 292 here. And so I'd easily be able to change that without having to like dive into that, changing it in the source text like you saw before, which as you saw isn't very like editable, right? And so then I'd have the ability to start doing things like easy ease this with the F9 key and go into the graph editor, and I could start easing this animation. So I could go boom and hit you like that, or I could make it, you know, start real slow and then ease up into a much faster sort of hit. Let's make that happen sooner. And so you could have an animation that's like, boom, there you go. And so with this little rig, which again, you can get from my project file soon enough, you know, that's kind of jumping out at us. But let's take this a little further. So you saw before that I was changing which actual weight of the typeface we were working with. So all of this scary looking code is giving us still access to that font size that you just saw. But I also set up, and again, if you're a code nerd, I'm trying to make this explainable and human readable right now. It's not necessarily the best way to code this, but
true. Yeah. And if you are, if you're interested in code, this is all JavaScript. So if you are keen to take on some of that stuff, it's an object-based language. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. But coding is fun and good for you. It's a language like any other language. So you could learn Spanish and have a good time abroad, or you could learn code and talk to a computer. Yep. Kyle, please continue.
Big bravo to whoever's running the Adobe Lives in the chat. Menus are back on the menu.
Oh, that was me. That's me.
Okay. Well, bravo to you.
Thank you.
Okay, good job. So I have created a drop-down menu right here. This is just another type of expression control. And with all of this code in here, I've linked the actual weight of the typeface to this drop-down menu. So you can see as I'm changing this, it's getting thicker, right? And so what this is saying, here's that same like font size that you saw a second ago. And then I created a thing called font select that I have linked to that drop-down menu. And then there's a bunch of stuff here that says if font select, if that drop-down menu is on the first option, then be thin. If that drop-down menu is on the second option, then be light. If it's on the third option, be regular, etc., etc. And so every time I change this, the typeface is actually updating. And I could make this be some other typeface entirely if I want. You actually have access to all of the typefaces that are installed on your machine right here. So I could, of course, come in here and find my favorite, like Papyrus or whatever that might be. So one thing I wanted to point out is that this type layer, because of the way I've set this up, you don't need to do it, but I find this helpful when I'm building templates and stuff. It is actually taking the words that you see from this other layer, which you'll notice is styled quite differently. This layer, this little stuff I'm doing here at the end, this is pulling style from itself. Like I kind of showed you a second ago, you can add this little thing .style, and so it's pulling all of its own sort of text properties. But then down here, I'm saying set text, and that is linking to this thing called text input, which you can see I made as a variable up here, which is this text input layer's source text property. So all of that is to say that if I change this to something else, then what you're actually seeing displayed on that main one is changed. And so I could set something up where I'm changing that drop-down menu. I could animate that between black and thin and medium or whatever. But these are not locking me into any particular thing because they're just changing the style properties of this. So I could type this back to Hotline and whatever it is, I still have that flexibility here, right? Now, we still kind of have an issue where this isn't really animating between different weights. It's changing the weight, but this isn't smooth. So let me show you sort of a more refined version of this. And like, this looks not bad. This works pretty okay at 12 frames per second. Or, if I made this even faster, just highlight all of these, hold Alt or Option, and then you can kind of accordion all these keyframes here. So if I made this a pretty quick little change, that's working okay. But if I wanted anything besides 1 frame per weight and 2 frames per weight, like it's just not going to be smooth. So I do have a solution for that. And while it's not like entirely user ready yet, it is here in After Effects. And Evan, you let me know when you feel like you want to hop back in here.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So there is this thing they actually put out last summer. This is from the After Effects team. And right now, these are sort of more scripting hooks, probably with the expectation that developers of third-party tools can use them to help make this more workable. But if you like to be a person who is ahead of the curve, you can do actual editable variable fonts in After Effects non-destructibly right now. You can just Google for this for scripting hooks for variable fonts. We could put this link in the episode description later on our site, motiondesignhotline.com. I've said it a couple times. But what this is a little script that you can run called inspect variable fonts, apply controls, yada, yada, yada. And it brings up this little window. So like I said, it's not super human friendly yet, but let's check this out. This little menu right here lets you choose from any variable font installed on your machine. And of course, you can just go to Adobe Fonts. There's a little toggle for variable fonts. So you can use those right there. I am going to use this one called May variable. And then you can apply that font. Oh, I need to make sure I select my layer. So boop, now it applied that font. And you'll see it showing me that it has some properties that are changeable. And some of these will have more than one property. This one just has one. And if you click this little button that says apply controls for axes, then it makes a little expression control, just like you saw a minute ago. And this now from 0 to 100 will do all the possible weights of this typeface. So if I make a quick keyframe here and then come up to say 1 second and I set this up to 100, we're going to get the fattest possible version of this typeface. So again, this is just creating some of that code in source text for me. It's different than what I wrote a minute ago, but kind of the same idea. And so looky there, this is actual like fully variable. And so now, again, I have keyframes that I can easy ease. I can go into the graph editor and I can do some nice easing to make that nice and snappy. Let's see how that feels. Boom, look at there. And so the one want. Yeah, it's what I want. The one thing about this right now is that it affects the entire text layer at once. So at least in its current iteration, you need to want to do this for the entire word or line, or break things up into multiple layers. But if you saw my example earlier, which is still up here, now you can probably kind of see how I'm doing a lot of this. These characters, this is actually 4 separate type layers, and each of these are animating from the lightest possible version of that May variable that I was just looking at to the heaviest possible version. And then I've got some other effects going on here, which I may or may not have time to talk about. But you can see here, here's just one of those layers. There you go. I'm also animating the scale of each character so that it goes bigger vertically and bigger a little bit horizontally, but not as much. And then I'm animating the actual position of the layer itself. And then I'm doing that tracking trick I showed you earlier, so it kind of holds its same width, even though that may or may not be necessary since I'm moving it a lot. And then out here, this is just a couple instances. Let me get rid of some of this extra stuff. Here is that your, and I'm using a little trick that I use a lot, which was designing the thing in black and white, and then using the tint effect to color it right here. So there it is, black and white, and then I'm just remapping those colors to something else. Makes it really easy to control, especially when you have, spoiler alert, multiple copies of the thing. So there's my your, and of course I just had that one soloed, so there's all of it. So there's all the words, you're just my type. And then I created a couple copies of that thing. I slightly offset the position of each one, and I slightly offset each of them in time by 1 frame. And so and I changed the colors with that easy little tint setup. So you get this nice kind of rainbow chaser effect, because each one is just slightly behind the others, right? And then I added a couple finishing effects. I used wave warp with just a slight phase offset on each one, so that it's kind of giving them all this waviness, but each one of those is slightly offset as well, so they all kind of look like they're a little bit behind each other. Again, you can explore these project files, and then just a little bit of look stuff to give it a little extra like woobliness and some frame rate and stuff like that. So hopefully that gets you at least the basic idea of how you might approach something like this. And I'll pitch it back to Evan to finish his fabulous example.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how finished I get. So
you can do it.
Umacorn was asking about the kind of fisheye-ness, because this is all pretty clinical. I'm not gonna lie. This is a little clinical here. Everything's got straight edges. That's not for me. You know, that's not how we do it. So there are a bunch of kind of post effects that we can drop on this. So for all of your straight edged whatevers, let's just put an adjustment layer over top of everything. An adjustment layer, again, for all y'all who is new to this, an adjustment layer is a type of layer that, like a lens, will change everything the way it looks underneath. But instead of a lens that might tint things rose-colored or that might make things darker, those are things we could be doing. We could change reality in whatever lens we want. So if we were to look at everything through a distorted lens, let me just drop a little distortion on here. Let's go with a turbulent displace. I'm going to displace things turbulently. Whoa, that's looking pretty blorped up.
Yep.
Right? And pretty nice. So if you want things to look blorpy and mushy, that's what turbulent displace is doing. It is. We can choose the amount of blorped, and we can choose the size of the individual blorps. That's pretty nice, right? And it looks pretty funny. 10 out of 10. That's pretty good. Turbulent displace. Let's do something a bit more controlled, shall we? Let's take something else out of the distort family of products. You got a bunch to choose from, and the one you might be most familiar with if you are coming from other apps is the warp. Warp. So warp, just as you'll see it expressed in Photoshop, in Illustrator, everywhere, is which way will you warp? Well, that's what we get here on the first thing. So would you like to do an arc, or an arc up, arc down, shell, fisheye? How about an inflate? We go on inflate. And so if we crank up the bend on that, we go, so we can just inflate that. Let me just go ahead and I will change that kind of rotation. You'll notice that I use a lot of little funny words for things sometimes.
They're our friends.
Yeah. So there we go.
We saw Turby a minute ago.
That's right. Turby and Trimothy Paths, and they're all here to be our friends. But you notice that just this, the addition of this inflation or maybe I could interest you in a fish eyeing or something like that. Like whatever you like. You can see that it's bending the pixels all over the place, and that's kind of making it happen. And you can keyframe this as well, so it can get more bent, less bent, get bent out of shape. You know, we can choose to get bent out of shape or not too. This is totally we can choose how we respond to stuff. So I'm going to just go ahead and keyframe this from a 10 up to a 41, 42, 43, 40 something big. So it's got like an inflating vibe, and then back down. And let's play that. All right, that's pretty close, and the kind of peak here is somewhere in between these, and it'll be kind of close. But let's go to that graph editor. You've seen us do that before. You click this little button over here. You go to the graph. You go to Graphtown. I grew up in a town called Grafton. Would you believe that, Kyle?
Wow.
So, Grafton, Ontario, Graphtown, Ontario. Big apple on the side of the highway. Not a lot of graphs. Kind of enemies of math. So, what we're going to do is we're going to push this to be a bit more extreme. The graph right now is showing us change over time, and if the graph is high, it is at maximum acceleration. And then if the line is low, it's not accelerating particularly quickly at all. So this is one way of observing data. Maybe something like that is to your taste. If you don't like looking at data this way, though, you can come down here to choose graph type and options. And I'm going to look at a value graph, and maybe you observe the world a little bit more this way. And we want to try to make sure that you have different ways of viewing the world and understanding these things. And so here it's just the value. The value, it is down here, and then the value it goes up to up here. And now the graph, in terms of speed, a more vertical line means something is traveling fast because the value is changing quickly over time. And if it's a very horizontal line, it's changing quite slowly over time. And so flat means no movement, and vertical means much movement. So if that helps. So you're voguing it up, you're remembering how these things work, and that'll help you to make sense of this graph. So I'm going to give these handles a little pull like this, and look, it looks kind of like a ghost. But now we have this kind of breathing situation going on with the amount of push and pull that's going on. What I love about this type of thing, and if you're playing around with it, try this out. If you've got your playhead over top of the keyframe, and if you want to get there, hit these little triangles, and that'll take you next keyframe, or J and K on the keyboard will snap you to the next available keyframe on your timeline. It doesn't mean just kidding. It's just J and K. Like just kidding. I'm not going to scrub my
just
timeline.
Keyframing.
Just keyframing. There we go. That's it, Kyle. Yes. So while I'm over this value, I can just crank that value up or down if I'm like, too extreme, not extreme enough. But the curve remains the same, and that's what we want. And also, well, maybe I don't want a fisheye anymore. I want a twist. I want to have a twist. So now I'm deploying a twist while this thing is doing it, which feels a little bit different, obviously, because it's a different thing that's going on. And nothing stops us from saying, I want to have a fisheye, but I also want to duplicate Command D that, and now...
Well, you know what does stop us from that? The end of the show.
The end of the show does, yeah. So I'm going to put a wave on this as well so that you can see that we're going like, we're pushing both at the same time. So if that's what you're feeling, you can do that. Move these things around, put them in different areas, point them in different ways, and you'll be happier that you did.
This is a playground, yeah.
Yeah, this is a playground. Nothing is set in stone, and get different angles, play around with it. If you want to get into the full version of the thing that I ended up making, that is going to be available at, of course, motiondesignhotline.com, a real website for real people like you, who we love having on this show with us. Let's go back to the two-shot, because we need to say goodbye. I need to get on to the rest of the type takeover around here. Our types were taken over, as were our hearts and minds. I hope you enjoyed this. But yeah, check out the good people at Goodtype, the good people at Women of Type. Stick around for that interview at the end of the day. You're going to love that. You're going to lots of excellent insights from some very knowledgeable people. But whole day of knowledge coming up, so we better get out of here. I'm Evan Abrams. You can find me on the internet at EC Abrams. He's Kyle Hamrick. You can find him at Kylosaurus Rex. All that stuff's down there. And today was all about type, but you might have other problems. How can they get that to us, Kyle?
We have a form. It's right there in the description below the video. Send it to us. Or, of course, motiondesignhotline.com. same form. Send us your questions. We'll turn it into stuff like this.
Yep, and you can message us on all the social media platforms. We're very personable people, so we want to interact with you out there in the world. So until next time, as we say on the shows, we say every Monday, or no, Wednesday. Today is Wednesday.
We say it Mondays too.
Yeah,
not publicly.
We just say it to each other on Monday. But Wednesdays, 9 o'clock Pacific time, you can find us here every week. But as we say, stay creative, be kind to each other, and we will see you all around the internet.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. And